in the frozen heart of Yakutia, where breath turns to ice before it leaves your lips. Daisy thought the hardest thing she would ever face was the winter that took her husband. She was wrong. 2 years ago, she saved a life that nature wanted back. Tonight, that life has returned and it brought the devil with it. The thermometer outside Daisy's kitchen window read negative 54 degrees Celsius. In Oymyakon, the pole of cold, numbers like that didn't just mean it was chilly. They meant that the air itself was a weapon. If you walked outside without covering your face, your eyelashes would snap off like brittle icicles within seconds. The silence out here was heavy. Pressing against the timber walls of the cabin that had been Daisy's entire world for 70 years. Daisy was not your typical grandmother. At 72, her hands were calloused from chopping wood and skinning rabbits. She lived alone at the edge of the taiga, 5 miles from the nearest neighbor. A solitude she had chosen after her husband, Pyotr, passed away a decade ago. People in the village called her Babushka Stal, Grandma Steel. They said she had ice water in her veins. But they didn't know about the secret she kept buried under the floorboards of her memory. It was late January. The wind was howling like a dying animal, rattling the heavy shutters. Daisy sat by the cast-iron stove, knitting a wool sock, the rhythmic click-click of the needles the only man-made sound in the house. Her German Shepherd mix, Polkan, was asleep at her feet. Suddenly, Polkan's head snapped up. The dog didn't bark. He didn't growl. He simply scrambled backward, claws skittering on the wood floor, whining a high, terrified pitch that Daisy had never heard before. He backed himself into the corner of the room, tail tucked so far between his legs he looked half his size. "Polkan? What is it?" Daisy whispered, putting her knitting down. Then she heard it, a heavy, wet thud against the front door. It wasn't the wind. The wind pushed. This had weight. It sounded like a bag of wet cement being thrown against the timber. Daisy reached for the double-barreled shotgun hanging above the mantel. Out here, a thud at the door usually meant a bear, though they should have been hibernating. Escaped convicts from the road camps sometimes wandered this far, driven mad by the frost. She cracked the heavy oak door just an inch, the safety chain still on. The wind screamed, blasting snow into the entryway, blinding her for a moment. She squinted into the swirling white abyss. At first, she saw nothing but the drifts. Then, the snow at her doorstep moved. It was massive, orange and black fur matted with ice and blood. A head the size of a shovel blade lifted slowly, golden eyes locking onto hers. Daisy gasped, the cold air burning her throat. It wasn't a bear. It was an Amur tiger, the apex predator of the Far East, a creature that could crush a human skull with a casual swipe. But this king of the taiga wasn't attacking. He was collapsing. The massive beast let out a low, gurgling chuff, a sound of recognition, not aggression, and slumped against the doorframe. His breathing ragged and wet. Daisy froze. She knew those eyes. "No," she breathed, the shotgun lowering slightly. Her mind flashed back 2 years. A different winter, slightly warmer. She had been checking her trap lines when she found a cub, barely 4 months old, whining next to the frozen carcass of its mother, who had been poached for her skin. The cub was starving, frostbitten, and doomed. Against every law of nature and the state, Daisy had taken him in. She had kept him in the old barn for 3 weeks, feeding him goat's milk and raw meat, warming his frozen paws with her own hands. She never named him. Naming a wild thing was a curse, but she whispered to him in the dark. When he was strong enough, she released him back into the deep woods, praying he would survive. She never saw him again. Until now, he was no longer a 10-pound ball of fluff. He was 600 pounds of muscle and teeth. And he was dying. Daisy didn't think. She didn't calculate the risk of dragging a super predator into her living room. She undid the chain and threw the door open. "Come," she commanded, her voice cracking. "Come in." The tiger tried to stand, but his back legs gave out. He dragged himself forward with his front paws, leaving a streak of bright crimson blood on the pristine snow. He collapsed onto the rug in the entryway, half in, half out. Daisy grabbed the back of his massive neck, burying her hands in the thick fur, and pulled with all her strength. Together, woman and beast tumbled into the warmth of the cabin. Daisy kicked the door shut and threw the deadbolt. The silence returned, but the room instantly filled with the heavy, metallic scent of wild animal and copper blood. Polkan was shivering under the kitchen table, Refusing to look, Daisy fell to her knees beside the tiger. His breathing was shallow. She ran her hands over his flank, feeling the heat radiating from his massive body. Her fingers found the source of the blood just behind his right shoulder blade. The fur was matted and torn. It wasn't a claw mark from a fight with another tiger. A bullet hole. Daisy's blood ran cold. Colder than the air outside. This wasn't an accident. Someone had shot him. And based on the freshness of the blood, the shooter wasn't far away. The tiger Daisy's mind involuntarily supplied the name Amor. Though she tried to resist, it was drifting in and out of consciousness. The bullet had missed the spine, but it was deep. If she didn't stop the bleeding, he would be dead by morning. Daisy went into survival mode. She grabbed her sewing kit, a bottle of vodka, and a clean bedsheet. "I need you to stay still," she whispered, pouring half the bottle of vodka over the wound. The tiger flinched, a low rumble vibrating through the floorboards and into Daisy's knees. Even after 2 years, even through the haze of pain, he remembered the scent of the woman who had saved him. He licked her hand with a tongue as rough as sandpaper, leaving a trail of bloody saliva. Daisy worked quickly. She wasn't a vet, but she had stitched up dogs, livestock, and even herself enough times to know the basics. She cleaned the wound, packed it with gauze to stem the flow, and wrapped his torso with strips of the bedsheet. As she worked, she noticed something else. A collar? No, not a collar. Buried deep in the thick fur of his neck was a thin, high-tech wire loop with a small black box attached. A tracking collar. Daisy frowned. Wildlife conservationists tagged tigers, yes, but the trackers used by the scientific institutes were bulky, orange, and clearly visible. This device was sleek, matte black, and devoid of any serial numbers or logos. It looked military, or illegal. She grabbed a pair of wire cutters from her tool drawer. Snap! Just as she tied the final knot on the bandage, headlights swept across her window curtains. Daisy's heart hammered against her ribs. No one came up her driveway in a blizzard. The road was treacherous even in daylight. She scrambled to the window, peering through the crack in the curtains. A modified Toyota Land Cruiser with a lift kit and blinding LED light bars was idling at her gate. The engine cut, and 2 doors opened. 2 men stepped out. The first she recognized immediately. Sergei. He was a smiling, jovial man who always asked about her health. Daisy had always liked him. The second man she did not know. He was tall, dressed in expensive, high-end Western hunting gear, camouflage that cost more than Daisy's house. He carried a rifle that looked more like a sniper system than a hunting gun, a suppressor on the barrel, thermal scope, carbon fiber stock. Daisy looked back at the tiger. He was conscious now, his head raised, eyes fixed on the door. A low growl began to build in his chest, a sound so deep it rattled the teacups on the shelf. "Quiet," she hissed, putting a finger to her lips. She grabbed a heavy wool blanket from the sofa and threw it over the tiger, covering everything but his nose. "Stay," she commanded. She barely had time to wipe the blood from her hands onto her apron before the heavy knock came. Bang, bang, bang. "Daisy Petrovna, are you awake?" It was Sergei's voice. Daisy took a deep breath, smoothed her hair, and opened the door just a crack, keeping the chain on. "Sergei?" she asked, feigning confusion. "It is 3 a.m. What is wrong?" Sergei was shifting his weight from foot to foot, his breath pluming in the cold light of the porch. "I am so sorry to wake you, babushka, but we have an emergency. This is Mr. Anderson." He gestured to the tall stranger. "He is a specialist." The stranger, Mr. Anderson, stepped into the light. He had pale blue eyes that lacked any warmth. He didn't smile. "Ma'am," Anderson said, his Russian accented but fluent. "We are tracking a dangerous animal. A tiger. It's gone rogue. It's injured and enraged." Daisy tightened her grip on the door. "A tiger? Here? I haven't seen a tiger in years." "We tracked it to the tree line just south of here," Anderson said, his eyes scanning the gap in the door, trying to see past her into the cabin. "Right around your property." Daisy's eyes darted to the table where the black box sat. She had cut the wire. She had killed the signal. "I haven't seen anything," Daisy said firmly. "And if a rogue tiger is out there, I am certainly not opening my door." "Daisy, please," Sergei pleaded, stepping closer. Mr. Anderson is here to protect the village. If that beast is wounded, it will look for warmth. It could be in your barn, under your porch. We need to check the perimeter and, well, we need to come in and warm up. The heater in the truck is acting up. It was a lie. Daisy could hear the truck idling smoothly. I am an old woman, Sergey. Ma'am, Anderson interrupted, his voice dropping an octave. He placed a gloved hand on the door, right near the opening. This isn't a request. This is a matter of public safety. We found blood on your driveway. Daisy felt a bead of sweat roll down her back despite the freezing draft. They had seen the blood. She looked at Sergey. There was something in his eyes, not concern. Fear. He looked terrified of Anderson. If she refused, they might kick the door in. If they came in and saw the tiger, they would kill him. And then, they would likely kill her to keep it quiet. Men with silenced rifles and illegal trackers didn't leave witnesses. She had to play this smart. Blood? Daisy made a show of gasping. Polkan cut his paw on the ice this morning. Bleed everywhere. I bandaged him up. She heard a whimper from under the table. Polkan, bless his cowardly heart, was selling the lie. Anderson didn't look convinced. He stared at her, his eyes cold and calculating. He pushed slightly against the door. We still need to check the premises. Standard procedure. Daisy realized she had no choice but to change the game. Fine, she said, her voice turning to the steel she was named for. But no man steps foot in my house in the middle of the night without the sheriff present. You know my husband was a colonel. Sergey, I have his service pistol, and I am very jumpy in my old age. She was bluffing. The pistol had been sold years ago. She only had the shotgun, and it was across the room. Anderson's eyes narrowed. He looked at Sergey, then back at Daisy. Then, Anderson smiled. It was a terrifying, thin smile. Of course, ma'am. We don't want to upset you. We will check the barn, but keep your door locked. I will be fine, Daisy said. She slammed the door and locked it. She leaned her back against the wood, sliding down until she hit the floor. Across the room, the blanket moved. The massive head of the tiger emerged. He looked at her, his golden eyes burning with a mixture of pain and intelligence. He growled low, a sound that vibrated through the floorboards. Daisy crawled over to him. They are not leaving, she whispered to the beast. They are going to the barn, and when they don't find you there, they will come back. She looked at the black tracking box on the table. She had made a mistake. By cutting it, she confirmed the tiger was here. Anderson knew. He was just biding his time, waiting for the right moment to breach. Daisy Petrovna stood up. She walked to the fireplace and pulled a loose stone from the hearth. Behind it sat a small metal box. She opened it and took out a satellite phone, a relic her son, who worked on the oil rigs, had forced her to keep. She hadn't turned it on in 4 years. She pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life, searching for signal. Come on, she whispered. Outside, the crunch of snow under heavy boots moved away from the door, toward the barn. But Daisy knew they wouldn't search for long. The barn was empty. The real hunt was about to begin inside the cabin. The satellite phone in Daisy's hand flickered once, showing a single, weak bar of signal, and then the screen went black. The battery, old and degraded, had succumbed to the cold seeping through the walls. Damn it, she hissed, slamming the device onto the table. There would be no cavalry, no police helicopter from Yakutsk. It was just her, a terrified dog, and a 600-pound wounded apex predator against 2 armed men. Outside, the crunch of snow stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than the blizzard. It was the silence of a hunter holding his breath before the shot. Daisy moved with a speed that defied her 72 years. She knew how these men worked. Anderson wasn't going to just storm in. That was messy. He would try to flush them out. And in Oymyakon, you didn't need fire to flush someone out. You just needed to let the winter in. She ran to the breaker box in the pantry and killed the main power. The cabin plunged into darkness, save for the faint orange glow of the wood stove. If they were going to come in, she wouldn't give them the advantage of light. She crouched beside the tiger. His breathing had steadied, but it was heavy, rattling in his chest. His golden eyes were open, reflecting the dying embers of the fire. He was watching the door, his ears swiveling like radar dishes. "They are coming back, Amour," she whispered, her hand resting on his massive head. "You need to be ready. You need to be the ghost." As if he understood, the tiger attempted to rise. He stumbled, his back legs sliding on the wood, a pained yowl catching in his throat. He didn't stand tall. He stayed low to the ground, a shadow among shadows, and limped toward the back bedroom, the darkest part of the house. He was instinctively seeking an ambush point. Then, the first glass shattered. It was the kitchen window. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. A heavy object, a rock wrapped in a rag, thudded onto the floor. Instantly, the temperature in the kitchen plummeted. The negative 54 degrees Celsius air didn't just drift in, it rushed in like a physical force, a white fog of frost curling along the floorboards. "Daisy!" Anderson's voice came from the darkness outside, amplified by a megaphone. "We know the animal is in there. The tracker signal didn't just disappear. You cut it." Daisy grabbed her shotgun. She crouched behind the overturned heavy oak kitchen table, aiming at the broken window. Polken was shivering against her leg, silent now. "I am giving you one chance," Anderson continued, his voice calm, reasonable, and terrifying. "Send the animal out. We will handle it. If you don't, we are coming in, and I cannot guarantee your safety in the crossfire." Daisy racked the slide of the shotgun. Clack, clack. "Come and get him!" she screamed, her voice shrill but steady. "But know this, American. I have lived through the collapse of the Union. I have lived through starvation, and I have buried a husband who was a better man than 10 of you." A chuckle drifted in from the wind. "Have it your way, babushka." Silence again. Daisy waited. Minutes stretched into hours. Her fingers began to numb around the steel of the trigger. The cold was winning. The frost was creeping up the walls, turning the condensation on her family photos into ice. Then she heard the sound she feared most. The whir of a power drill. They were at the back door, the service entrance. They weren't kicking it in. They were drilling out the lock cylinder. Anderson was a professional. Daisy scrambled backward, moving from the kitchen to the hallway. She couldn't cover both doors. She had to retreat to the choke point. The drilling stopped. A soft click. The back door creaked open. The wind howled through the house now, creating a tunnel of freezing air. "Clear left," Anderson's voice whispered. "I don't like this," Sergei whispered back. "She's an old woman with a bird gun." Flashlights on, strobe mode, disorient her. 2 beams of blinding white light cut through the darkness, strobing violently. Daisy squeezed her eyes shut. Blinded, she fired blindly toward the ceiling, a warning shot. Boom! The buckshot tore into the plaster, raining dust down on the intruders. "Contact front!" Anderson shouted. 2 distinct pops sounded foot, foot. Suppressed gunfire. Daisy felt a sledgehammer hit her shoulder. She spun around, dropping the shotgun, and slammed into the wall. Pain, hot and searing, exploded in her left arm. "No," she gasped, sliding down the wall. Anderson moved in, his tactical boots crunching on the glass. He kicked the shotgun away from her reaching hand. He loomed over her, a dark silhouette against the strobing light, the thermal scope of his rifle glowing faintly green. "Stupid woman," Anderson spat. He aimed the rifle at her chest. "You chose a wild animal over your own life. Why? For a rug?" "He is not a rug." Daisy wheezed. Clutching her bleeding shoulder, Sergei stepped into the light. He looked at Daisy, then at the blood pooling on the floor. His face was pale. "You shot her. You said we were just going to scare her. Anderson, this is murder." "Shut up, Sergei." Finish scanning the room. "Where is the tiger?" Anderson pressed the barrel of the suppressed rifle against Daisy's forehead. The metal was burning cold. "Where is it?" he demanded. "Tell me, and I might let you bleed out slowly instead of finishing it now." Daisy looked up at him. Through the pain, through the tears freezing on her cheeks, she smiled. "He is right behind you." Anderson frowned. It was an old movie cliché. But Sergei saw it. Sergei was standing near the bedroom doorway, his flashlight sweeping the darkness. The beam caught 2 glowing orbs floating in the blackness, 7 feet off the ground. "Anderson," Sergei whimpered. A low sound began to fill the room. It wasn't a growl. It was a vibration. It started in the floorboards, traveled up through the soles of their boots, and resonated in their chests. It was the sound of a tectonic plate shifting. Anderson spun around. From the shadows of the bedroom, the tiger emerged. He didn't limp. He didn't stumble. Pain was a chemical signal that his brain had simply chosen to ignore. He was pure, distilled violence wrapped in orange and black velvet. The strobe light caught him, illuminating the blood-soaked bandage around his ribs, the bearing of 3-inch canines, and the sheer, impossible size of him. In the small hallway, he looked like a monster from a myth. Anderson raised his rifle. He was fast. But the tiger was faster. With a roar that shattered the remaining windows and stopped Daisy's heart in her chest, the tiger launched himself. He covered the 15 feet in a single bound. Anderson fired once. The bullet went wild, embedding itself in the floor as 600 pounds of tiger hit him squarely in the chest. The impact sounded like a car crash. Anderson was thrown backward, flying through the air and smashing into the kitchen cabinets, the wood splintering on impact. The rifle skittered across the floor. The tiger didn't maul him immediately. He pinned Anderson to the floor, one massive paw on the man's chest, claws fully extended, piercing the expensive tactical vest like it was paper. The beast lowered his face inches from Anderson's hot, bloody breath steaming in the freezing air. Anderson, the professional killer, the man who hunted for sport, screamed. It was a high, thin sound of absolute primal terror. Sergei dropped his flashlight. He backed up, hands raised, shaking so hard his teeth rattled. "I didn't shoot," he sobbed. The tiger turned his massive head slowly toward Sergei. He snarled, a sound of wet tearing fabric. But he didn't move from Anderson. Daisy dragged herself up. Her shoulder was on fire, but she had to end this. "Amour!" she shouted. The tiger's ears twitched. He looked back at Daisy. His eyes were wild, dilated with kill frenzy, but there was recognition there. "Enough," she commanded, pointing to the door with her good hand. "Leave them. Go." Anderson was gasping for air, ribs likely crushed. The tiger saw the movement. He didn't bite. He simply swiped, a blur of motion, a wet snap. Anderson's arm broke at the forearm, the knife clattering away. The man passed out from the shock. The tiger looked at Daisy one last time. He chuffed that soft, friendly sound he had made when he was a cub drinking goat's milk from a bottle. He nudged her good hand with his wet nose, leaving a smear of Anderson's blood on her skin. Then he turned to Sergei. Sergei fell to his knees. "Please," he whispered. The tiger stepped over Sergei, ignoring him as if he were a piece of furniture. He paused at the threshold, looking back into the warmth of the house, then stepped out into the blizzard. Within seconds, the white darkness swallowed him whole. The police from the regional center arrived 4 hours later. The storm had broken, leaving the world silent and buried under 3 feet of fresh snow. They found Anderson unconscious, tied up with duct tape, suffering from severe hypothermia, a broken arm, and 4 broken ribs. Sergei was sitting at the kitchen table, weeping, drinking tea that Daisy had made him with one hand. They airlifted Daisy to the hospital in Yakutsk. She had lost a lot of blood, but the doctors said she was made of iron. When the investigators asked what happened, Daisy told them the truth mostly. She told them intruders broke in. She told them her dog, Polkan, was very brave. But the wounds on the man, the lead investigator asked, looking at the photos of Anderson's shredded vest. That was not a dog. That looks like a bear or a tiger. Daisy sat up in her hospital bed, looking out the window toward the distant, frozen tiger. A tiger? She smiled, her eyes twinkling. In Oymyakon? Don't be ridiculous, detective. Tigers don't come this far north. It must have been the wind. The wind plays tricks on you out here. The investigator knew she was lying. Sergei knew she was lying. But Sergei never spoke a word of it. He sold his truck, donated the money to the local church, and moved south to a city where he never had to see snow again. Daisy returned to her cabin 2 weeks later. She fixed the door. She replaced the window. She never saw the tiger again. But every winter, on the anniversary of that night, she would find something on her porch. One year, it was a dead boar. The next, a deer carcass, perfectly killed, untouched save for the neck. It was a tithe. A thank you. The locals say that if you go into the woods near Daisy's house, the wolves don't howl. They say the forest is quiet because the king is watching. And he remembers the woman who saved him. In Yakutia, they say the cold kills. And that, my friends, is the legend of Babushka Stal. In a world where we think humans are the masters of nature, it's a chilling reminder that we are just guests in their domain. Daisy saved a life, and the universe balanced the scales. Was it just instinct? Or do animals remember kindness in a way we can't understand? If this story sent a shiver down your spine, hit that like button. It helps the channel more than you know. What would you do if a tiger knocked on your door? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next true tale from the dark side of nature.